Good morning. I'm Meredith Barber, and I'm the interim minister here at Horizon. I'm delighted to welcome you to our worship service this morning. If you'd like to learn more about our church, please visit our website, horizonuu.org. We'd also like to invite you to our virtual coffee hour, the link for which can be found on our website. We invite you to join us after the worship service today for a conversation on covenant. Before our service begins, I have one exciting announcement. We're having a virtual gala fundraiser this year, and now bidding is open October 24th through the 31st. Please look for more information on our Facebook page, in the newsletter, and on our website. Thank you so much, and our worship service will now begin. Our call to worship this morning is entitled A Place of Belonging and Caring by the Reverend Kimberly Ann Tomzak Carlson. It is not by chance that you arrived here today. You have been looking for something larger than yourself. Inside you there is a yearning, a calling, a hope for more, a desire for a place of belonging and caring. Through your struggles, someone nurtured you into being, instilling a belief in a shared purpose, a common yet precious resource that belongs to us all when we share. And so you began seeking a beloved community, a people that does not put fences around love, a community that holds its arms open to the possibilities of love. A heart home to nourish your soul and share your gifts. Welcome home. Welcome to worship. Our chalice is lit this morning in gratitude for the chance to gather our spirits, to slow down and to listen to that voice that calls from deep within us. I invite you to join me now in saying together the words of our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in harmony with the earth. Thus do we covenant together.
Find a stillness, hold a stillness, let a stillness carry me. Find the silence, hold the silence, let the silence carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony. Seek the essence, hold the essence, let the essence carry me. Let me flower, help me flower, watch me flower, carry me. In the Spirit, by the Spirit, with the Spirit giving power, I will find true harmony.
Hi, everyone, and it's good to be back with you for our time of For All Ages. And so I'd like to invite the young or the young at heart to come a little closer to the screen. Today, I'm talking to you from near a bridge, which is at a walking path near my house. And it has to do with what we're exploring today in worship, covenants. And do you remember how earlier in the month, we learned that covenants are sacred promises we make to each other about how we'll be together? And that since Unitarian Universalism doesn't have a unifying creed or belief system, it's our covenants which bind us together in community. And what if I told you that covenants are like bridges? The theme this month is cultivating relationships. Our faith places relationships and our promises to each other of how we will be together in community at the center of our faith. And since we're human, sometimes we break those promises and hurt other people. And when we do this, walls come up between us. It happens between family members, between friends, between members of the community, and even between people who don't know each other. It's part of being human to make mistakes and break promises to each other, whether we meant to or not. And so when this happens, we need to dig deep and rebuild those relationships. We need to learn from our mistakes and try to do better in the future. And so now our bridge. So first, let me ask, what does a bridge do? Did you say connect 2 points? Yes, it does. So how is a bridge different from a road or a path? If you said a bridge helps you overcome obstacles in your way, you are exactly right. And here's what the bridge behind me in the video really looks like. So without this bridge, I'd have to do lots of climbing and my shoes would get all wet and muddy and full of little grass blades. I don't even think I'd want to try to cross this creek if the bridge weren't here. And so covenants are like bridges. They're like them because not only do they connect the two sides, but they provide a way back over obstacles. Obstacles like hurt feelings and misunderstandings. And they show us a way to mend our mistakes. In its wording, a covenant can show us how to come back into right relationship with other people. In our religious education classes, many of our covenants list ouch, oops, and educate as part of how we will be together. Ouch means that the person who is hurt talks about their hurt and their feelings and don't let them fester and get worse. Oops is for the person who caused the hurt. It asks them to fix the relationship and admit to their mistakes and apologize. And they promise to educate themselves, that is, to learn from their mistakes and do better in the future. And I know apologies are hard. Sometimes we don't mean to hurt other people because what we said or we did that hurt somebody else was done out of ignorance or was just a mistake. And our society doesn't value apologies because many people think apologies make you look weak. Have you ever been told, oh, you're too sensitive or your skin is too thin? I bet you have, but I'm here to tell you that apologies do not make you weak and are actually essential to having good and healthy relationships. And as we apologize, and even more, when we show others that we've learned from our mistakes, those walls we talked about that came up between us because of hurt feelings, those begin to come down. Instead of there being a wall separating us, our apologies become a bridge. And our covenant is the blueprint to show us the way.
Our Share the Plate offering this month benefits the Afaya Center, which is a local organization committed to reproductive justice. The Afaya Center specifically works to transform the lives, well-being, and health of Black women. And a few of their current initiatives involve research that will reduce the maternal mortality rates of Black women in Texas, working to protect abortion access, education around HIV, and working to build a Black women-centered reproductive justice movement in Texas. The offering will now be joyfully given and received. Our first reading this morning is entitled The Task of the Religious Community by the Reverend Dr. Mark Morrison Reed. The central task of the religious community is to unveil the bonds that bind each to all. There is a connectedness, a relationship discovered amid the particulars of our own lives and the lives of others. Once felt, it inspires us to act for justice. It is the church that assures us that we are not struggling on our own, but as members of a larger community. The religious community is essential, for alone our vision is too narrow to see all that must be seen, and our strength too limited to do all that must be done. Together, our vision widens and our strength is renewed. I invite you now to join me in a moment of meditation or prayer, after which we'll hear our responsive hymn, Spirit of Life. Loving God, Spirit of Life, mystery in which we live and move and have our being, draw near to us this morning and know our hearts. We give thanks this morning for leaves just starting to turn, for a cool breeze against our face, for all the tiny little ways we are nudged to pay attention, to slow down, to pause in gratitude for these moments that surround us. Spirit of Life, we give thanks for relationships and all the ways they hold us steady, the ways we are shown love and the ways we love one another. This is how we are meant to live. We give thanks for relationships even when they are difficult and complicated and when we don't understand why people do what they do. For these little wrinkles give life its richness. I give thanks for all of you who have showed up today, who have taken some time to pause and to care for your spirits. This is an act of open rebellion against the loneliness of our time. It matters that you are here, every single one of you. Loving God, when the weight of the world feels like too much, too confusing, violent, maybe even hopeless, remind us that we are not alone. Nudge us toward community instead of isolation. We lament today the little wrongs and feelings of guilt that we hold within, always wondering if we did the right thing, if we could have done better or done more, wishing we didn't snap, wishing we were different people. Remind us that we are human and that each new day brings with it a chance to love one another fully, the best we can. May it be so. Amen.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the heart, giving life the shape of justice, whose only cause wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me.
Our second reading this morning comes from the writings of Adrienne Marie Brown. She writes, "When we are engaged in acts of love, we humans are at our best and most resilient. The love and romance makes us want to be better people. The love of children that makes us drop our whole lives to meet their needs. The love of family that makes us drop everything to take care of them. The love of community that makes us work tirelessly with broken hearts. Love leads us to observe in a much deeper way than any other emotion. If love were the central practice of a new generation of organizers and spiritual leaders, it would have a massive impact. If the goal was to increase the love rather than winning or dominating a constant opponent, I think we could actually imagine liberation from constant oppression. We would suddenly be seeing everything we do, everyone we meet, not through the tactical eyes of war, but through eyes of love. We would see that there's no such thing as a blank canvas, an empty land, or a new idea. But everywhere there is complex, ancient, fertile ground full of potential. We would understand that the strength of our movement is in the strength of our relationships, which could only be measured by their depth. Here ends the reading. Good morning. So today we begin the second part of our sermon series on covenant. And in case you missed part 1, last week we left off with Noah and the covenant or partnership that God made with Noah and eventually with all of humanity as a way to bring goodness into the world. We could continue tracing this idea of a promise, a partnership between God and people throughout the Hebrew scriptures. It's a recurring theme. God continues trying again and again to bless all of creation, and humans, in whatever way, just can't quite seem to get it right, no matter how badly we want to. As we move to the Christian scriptures, we have, of course, this idea of another covenant, and this is where Jesus comes in as a part of the promise between God and humanity. So this gives some weight and some context to what it really means to be in covenant, to make a promise of the heart. But today, we're moving from the promise to the practice of covenant. Maybe all this talk of promises sounds really beautiful, but you're wondering what this looks like lived out, and I'm right there with you. The truth is that it's complicated. Henry Nouwen, beloved Catholic priest and well-loved teacher on ministry, described beloved community this way: the place where the person you least want to be around is. And honestly, though that might sound a little harsh, I found that that can be the truth. In the reading we heard earlier, Adrienne Marie Brown talks about the different ways we show love in community. We heard last week about the way covenant is a partnership for bringing goodness into the world. And I would say that goodness first begins with love. We say it every week in the words of our affirmation: love is the doctrine of this church. This phrase gives voice to the fact that we are a free church, absent creeds or a shared canon, but it also reminds us that we are bound by love in everything that we do. When love is at the center, that guides the way we work for justice, the way we treat one another. We must love our neighbors as ourselves. Cornel West was a fixture when I was at Harvard Divinity School, and he has famously said that justice is what love looks like in public. You all are called by your mission statement and your articulated vision for your congregation to help create a beloved community. This is a lifelong task, a deep and holy calling lived out in the world, which will push each one of us to the limits of the way we think we can love, and maybe further still. It is easy to get overwhelmed and overburdened by the injustices of the world around us. But I believe that when we start in small chunks with those right in front of us, we have the most power to make change, to model the world we'd like to live in, to model the beloved community. I've long been of the opinion that there are many things in this world outside of our control, and it's easy to get bogged down in all we cannot change. But we can control the way we treat one another in this community, where love is held at the center. In his sermon, Behaving, Believing, and Belonging, Stephen Jonason wrote, in his book Sacred Fragments, Rabbi Neil Gilman notes how the founder of Reconstructionist Judaism, Mordecai Kaplan, taught that there are three possible ways of identifying with the religious community: by behaving, by believing, or by belonging. In many ways, Unitarian Universalism is akin to this, though with a difference. If we accept Mordecai Kaplan's analysis that people in religious communities tend to identify with those communities by behaving, believing, or belonging, we will find ample evidence to support this view. Earl Morse Wilbur's classic threefold slogan of Unitarianism, freedom, reason, and tolerance, reflects our ways of behaving, believing, and belonging. Our behavior is characterized by freedom. Our beliefs are built upon reason. Our way of belonging is characterized by tolerance. Now, I really love everything that Stephen says here, and I think it's true about belonging and tolerance. But I am a realist, and there are some things that I cannot tolerate. Tolerance, I think, especially in Unitarian Universalism, has too often been used to shield the person saying something harmful, and not often enough to help the person being harmed. I don't think we're always as quick as we should be to interrupt, to acknowledge those who are hurting. And I will not abide tolerance for the sake of tolerance when love is not at the heart of the matter. Now, all of this is not to say that we're not good people, that we're not kind to one another, that we don't behave the way we should. We will not be in the business here of dealing with shoulds. As my favorite writer, Nora McInerney, says, don't should yourself. We're not engaging in these conversations in the work of creating a behavioral covenant because anything has gone wrong. Rather, this is the work of faith development in the congregation. We need something to turn to in times of disagreement as well as in times of harmony. And anyone who's been around church long enough knows that these will ebb and flow. Really, I think the idea that there's conflict in church is a tale as old as time. In places where we allow ourselves to love, to be open, to be honest about who we are, and trying to engage deeply with our spirits, conflict almost needs to bubble to the surface. It's a sign that we are in deep relationship, that we care a lot, and that it's okay to disagree and we won't die. That we're talking about the things that really matter to people. It's almost like in a romantic relationship or in a really deep friendship. If you never argue, you probably are not that invested or not that close, and eventually you will have a fight. And the way you move on from that fight, or if you can at all, tells you everything you need to know about the future of that relationship. The way someone apologizes, or if they're able to, says a great deal about the kind of person they are. In fact, I would say that conflict is holy. We talked earlier about rest and white supremacy culture, that one of the hallmarks of this way of being is the assumption that any conflict is bad and is not okay. How dare someone come to us directly to discuss an issue, right? Well, why is church held to any different standard? I think sometimes people come to church expecting perfection, expecting a place where people treat one another with kindness at all times, where no one is prickly or sarcastic, where no one shows their humanness. Not only is that not realistic, it's just not very honest. The reality is that this is an institution that is made up of imperfect human beings. I would rather have a community of people who are all in with their beauty and their flaws, where it's okay to acknowledge hard truths, than where the slightest disagreement could cause the whole thing to crumble. And I think that's what we already have here at Horizon. A covenant, a promise about how we want to be together is a way to strengthen what already exists, to put that down somewhere for everyone to acknowledge. And we know when we enter into covenant, there will be times when we don't live up to our promises. Maybe it's unintentional. Maybe we fail to communicate something, or it gets misconstrued. Or maybe it actually is malicious. Maybe we feel hurt or wronged, and we go and we share that hurt with other people because we feel so badly. Maybe we're hurting so much that we threaten to leave our church, withhold our pledge, or do something else to make other people understand how bad we feel. These examples honestly could come from any religious community, across traditions, across the world. This is just what happens when people come together. There can be problems, but there is also what we talked about a few weeks ago, the grout, the glue that holds us together. This glue that's cemented in board meetings and cups of coffee and rides and phone calls and birthdays and protests. And I don't think we can have that level of closeness, that intimacy, without also sometimes having conflict. One of my favorite writers, Louise Erdrich, writes, "Life will break you. Nobody can protect you from that, and living alone won't either, for solitude will also break you with its yearning." You have to love. You have to feel. It is the reason you are here on this earth. You are here to risk your heart. You are here to be swallowed up. And when it happens that you are broken or betrayed or left or hurt or death brushes near, let yourself sit by an apple tree and listen to the apples falling around you in heaps. Life brings us highs and lows and everything in between. And part of the joy of the journey is to feel every moment, to pay attention, to take notice, even when relationships are hard, even when we're in conflict. Because we are called to love one another, not just in the easy times, but through the highs and the lows. In the words of Mark Nepo, unconditional love is not so much about how we receive and endure each other as it is about the deep vow to never, under any condition, stop bringing the flawed truth of who we are to each other. We are called to stay in relationship. And that brings us back to that idea that how we are together is the most important thing, more important than what we believe. So what do we do when we haven't been the way that we want to be? One of the most important parts of covenant is the idea that there's a path back into relationship. We don't promise that the path is an easy one, but we do promise that we don't just cut people off. We don't just end a relationship without warning or communication or trying to work through things. And this opens the door for something called restorative justice that I started hearing about maybe 5 or 6 years ago. Restorative justice is a system of criminal justice, though I think we can apply it to many contexts, which focuses on the rehabilitation of people through reconciliation with victims and with the community as a whole. So restorative justice mandates that we don't view someone who has done harm as bad or as outside the circle of care. Instead, we ask what harm was done and to whom. And then we wonder what needs have arisen as a result of that harm. And finally, who will meet those needs? So this is our path back into relationship. We wonder, where is the hurt? And we go there together. One of the most important classes I ever took in seminary was not about history or theology, but about working with people. And I'm not usually one for leadership courses because I think there's a lot of tendency to overgeneralize, and I prefer to live in nuance. But this class was different. We began the class with something called a language of public agreement that I immediately recognized as a covenant about how we were going to be together in this class. We agreed to basic things like regular bathroom breaks, an outline of where we were going each class, because I should say it was 3 hours long. But we also discussed things like assuming best intentions and making it okay to name if we hadn't done the reading and still being able to have a discussion. And I wish that I could make you feel the level of safety and security that we built together in that room by being honest. It was the one and only time I've ever felt that way in an academic setting. And the key was that the covenant wasn't just something that we wrote up and put on the wall and never talked about again, but we actually checked in with it often and wondered about how we were living into the aspirations we had set for ourselves and for our peers. We named when we had failed, and we also named when we did well. This was the biggest part of our learning, doing what our professor gently pushed us toward, making our own shortcomings discussable, leading with an honesty and vulnerability that strengthened our relationships. We heard earlier in the reading from Mark Morrison Reed about the central task of religious community. We need one another. This is the purpose. We cannot do it alone. Individualism has had its day, but I think we've learned that individualism doesn't do anything to help make a faith community. Together, we can accomplish things that we would never have dreamed of doing alone. And I believe this idea is revolutionary. In America today, I think it's easy to feel powerless, and this powerlessness can lead to feelings of anger, shame, guilt, mostly turned inward. Why can't I do something? Am I doing enough? But together, with enough people, we can make change. I truly believe that. It's part of why I'm in ministry. And together, as a group of people who love one another, there is so much potential, so much hope to be found. I heard from some folks after our discussions at coffee hour last week that they wondered, why might we be having these kind of conversations? Did something happen? Isn't covenant kind of a punitive concept in some ways? What happens when we mess up? Well, I want to say that I have experienced Horizon as an incredibly kind, thoughtful, and actively welcoming community. And I believe that working toward a covenant can reinforce all the positive things that we already find here. It's kind of the way you don't wait until there's an emergency to get your car checked out or to go to the doctor. Ideally, you're working on this often. You're doing routine maintenance. Relationships also require this kind of maintenance, this kind of check-in. And a covenant gives us the language, too, with which to check in. There's a clear opening to a conversation that many of us wouldn't otherwise know how to have. In the words of Adrienne Marie Brown, the harder things are to say, the more necessary they are to say. Being in covenant with one another requires the difficult conversation, the painful apology, the lump in our throats when we know we're close to something meaningful. Because by entering into covenant with one another, we're putting our faith in one another. We said last week that since I know God is not a part of the equation for everyone, covenant almost matters more. We are in partnership with one another to bring this goodness into the world. The Reverend Karen Anderson puts it so well. She writes, "For a long time now, I haven't believed in a God with a will, intentionality, or consciousness. I don't put all my eggs in the basket of a God who will save and transform me. Rather, I look to humans, to my relationships with people. Transcendence with life, with the holy, comes through my human relationships. And yes, I get that humans will let me down and will hurt me as well. They will disappoint, betray, and otherwise fail me. but they also have repeatedly saved me from a selfish me-ism that can destroy my well-being and lead me to false idols. They have loved me so fiercely that I am brought back from despair, loneliness, and isolation. They have cajoled me into my better self when frankly I sometimes don't want to bother with the effort. They have challenged me to aspire to possibilities that I fear are unobtainable because they see something in me that I far too often can't see in myself. They are human. They are the 4 F's: flawed, fragile, effed up, and most importantly, fabulous. This understanding is the humanism that has transcended the intellect, buried itself inside me, and inspires and heals me daily. So this is the beginning of a conversation we'll be having for a while now about what covenant can look like. And I hope for you that you have the kind of relationships that Karen describes. I know that we have that here. And I keep going back to that line from Rumi. Though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come, yet again, come. May it be so. Amen. We extinguish the flame of this chalice, but not our commitment to our mission to welcome radically, love boldly, grow spiritually, and serve courageously. We carry this commitment in our hearts because we envision a beloved community filled with compassion, helping all to thrive in a just world.
Immortal love, forever full, forever flowing free, forever shared, forever whole, a never-ending sea. Our outward lips confess the name, all other names above, but love alone knows whence it came and comprehendeth love. The winds of love awake and blow the mists of hate away. Sing out, O truth divine, and tell how wide and far we stray. The letter fails, the systems fall, and every symbol wanes. The Spirit overseeing all, eternal love remains.
Friends, as we go forth from our time together this morning, my hope for you is that you hold love at the center of all that you do. Go in peace.